Good evening, friends. Tonight we'll drift into a slow and gentle journey through ancient Greek myths and the quiet corners of Troy's legendary story. We'll walk through marble temples, listen to whispered prophecies, and watch the slow dance of gods and mortals in a time when the world was both simpler and more mysterious. Dim your lights, settle under your blanket, let the noise of the day fade away. And if this calm journey helps you relax, feel free to tap like and subscribe, only if it feels right. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from tonight, and tell me what time it is in your city right now. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world, whether you're winding down after a long day or finding peace in the quiet hours of the night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's begin our gentle walk through the ancient walls of Troy. You find yourself standing in the cool shadows of Apollo's temple, where the morning light filters through tall columns like golden honey. The marble floor feels smooth and cold beneath your feet, worn smooth by thousands of pilgrims who have come seeking the gods' wisdom. But today, something feels different in this sacred space. In the far corner, near the altar where frankincense burns with sweet, heavy smoke, a young woman kneels in prayer. Her name is Cassandra, and she is the most beautiful of King Priam's daughters. Her dark hair falls in waves down her back, held in place by a simple golden band that catches the light. She wears the white robes of Apollo's priestess, soft linen that rustles quietly as she moves. What makes Cassandra special isn't just her beauty, though. It's the gift that sits like a weight on her shoulders, a gift that feels more like a curse with each passing day. You see, Cassandra can see the future, not in grand, sweeping visions, but in small, precise moments that flash through her mind like lightning. She sees her brother Hector falling in battle, his bronze armour catching the sun. She sees Greek ships burning on the shore, their sails turning to ash. She sees her father's face lined with worry as messengers bring news of defeats. And most clearly of all, she sees Troy itself, her beloved city with its towering walls and busy markets, consumed by flames. But here's the cruel twist in Cassandra's story. Apollo, the golden god of prophecy and music, once loved her. He offered her the gift of seeing the future if she would be his. Cassandra accepted the gift, feeling the warm power flow through her like honey in her veins. But when Apollo reached for her, expecting her love in return, she stepped back. She had taken his gift, but she would not give herself to him. Apollo's beautiful face twisted with anger and hurt. If he couldn't take back his gift, for even gods cannot undo their own divine presence, then he would make sure it brought her no joy. With a breath that smelled of laurel, leaves and summer wine, he cursed her. She would see the truth, yes. She would know exactly what was coming. But no one would ever believe her. Now, as you watch Cassandra in the temple, you can see the weight of this curse in the way her shoulders curve forward, in the tired lines around her young eyes. She has tried so many times to warn people. She has grabbed her brothers by their bronze-clad arms and begged them not to fight. She has whispered urgent warnings to her mother about which ships to avoid, which alliances would fail. But every time she speaks, something strange happens. Her words seem to slide off people's minds like water off marble. They hear her voice, but the meaning doesn't stick. They look at her with that patient, distant expression people wear when they think someone is speaking nonsense. Poor Cassandra, they whisper to each other. So beautiful, but touched by madness. The morning light grows stronger now, warming the temple stones. Cassandra rises from her knees, her robes whispering against the floor. She walks to the window that looks out over Troy, and you can see what she sees, the great city spread out below like a jewel. Troy is magnificent. Its walls rise higher than any other cities, built from stone so perfectly fitted that you couldn't slide a knife blade between them. The palace gleams white in the sun, its courtyards filled with flowering trees. In the lower city, merchants spread their wares in the agora. silk from the east, amber from the north, silver cups that ring like bells when you tap them. Children play in the narrow streets, their laughter echoing off the buildings. Women lean from their windows to hang washing that flutters like colourful prayer flags in the warm breeze. Old men sit in the shade of olive trees, moving wooden pieces across game boards worn smooth by countless matches. Bakers work their ovens, filling the air with the scent of fresh bread. It's a city full of life, full of people who wake each morning thinking about ordinary things, what to cook for dinner, whether the baby's cough is getting better, if the new batch of wine will be sweet or sour. They live their daily lives with the comfortable certainty that their walls will protect them, that their king is wise, that their gods watch over them. But Cassandra sees something else layered over this peaceful scene. She sees the shadows of what's coming. Greek ships crowding the harbour like angry wasps, bronze spears glinting in the hands of foreign soldiers, smoke rising from burning houses. She sees the faces of her neighbours, twisted with fear instead of bright with laughter. The vision is so strong that she grips the window ledge, her knuckles white. She has tried to find ways around Apollo's curse. She has written her warnings in letters, thinking perhaps the written word might carry more weight than speech, but the letters are dismissed as the fantasies of a troubled girl. She has tried speaking to animals, hoping they might carry her messages, but even they seem to forget her words as soon as they hear them. Sometimes, in her darkest moments, Cassandra wonders if it would be easier to stop trying, to let the visions come and go without fighting them, to live quietly in the temple and tend to the simpler duties of a priestess, lighting incense, pouring wine offerings, sweeping the marble floors. But then she thinks of her little cousin who brings her wildflowers, or her mother humming while she embroiders, or her father's proud smile when he watches the sun set over his beloved city. How can she not try to save them? A dove lands on the windowsill beside her, cooing softly. Cassandra reaches out to stroke its grey feathers, and for a moment she feels a tiny spark of hope. The dove doesn't judge her words or dismiss her warnings. It simply accepts her touch, warm and alive and present in this moment. Maybe, she thinks, the details of the future aren't set in stone. Maybe there are still choices to be made, paths that could branch away from the fire and destruction she sees. Maybe her warnings will eventually break through, like water wearing away rock, one drop at a time. The dove takes flight, circling once around the temple, before disappearing over the city walls. Cassandra watches it go, and you can see her straightening her shoulders, setting her jaw with quiet determination. She may be cursed to speak truths that no one believes, but she is also blessed with knowledge that could save everything she loves. Today, like every day, she will try again. She will find new words, new ways to make people listen. She will look for allies among the servants and children, among the merchants and craftsmen who might be more willing to hear unusual ideas. She will study the timing of her visions, looking for patterns that might help her understand when and how to act. As she turns away from the window, you notice something else about Cassandra. Despite the weight of her terrible gift, despite the loneliness of being the only one who knows what's coming, there's still something unbroken in her spirit. She moves with grace and purpose. Her eyes, though sad, are still bright with intelligence and love for her city. Perhaps that's the real story here. Not just the tragedy of unheeded warnings, but the quiet heroism of someone who keeps trying anyway. Someone who chooses hope even when hope seems impossible, who tends the flame of truth even when everyone insists it's darkness. The temple grows quiet around her as she begins her daily prayers, but you know that behind her calm exterior her mind is already working, planning, hoping, preparing for another day of trying to save a world that doesn't want to be saved. And perhaps, in that determination, there lies the seed of something that even Apollo's curse cannot touch. The power of love that refuses to give up, even when the future looks as dark as a moonless night. What do you think would happen if just once someone truly listened to what Cassandra had to say, as Cassandra continues her prayers in Apollo's temple? let us wander through the city she loves so much, the Troy that exists in this moment, before prophecies come true, when life flows as naturally as a river through its daily channels. You step out from the temple's cool shadows into the warm morning sun, and Troy spreads before you like a living tapestry. The first thing that strikes you is how the light catches everything. The white limestone of the buildings, the bronze fittings on doors and windows, the gold thread woven into the clothing of wealthy merchants. It's easy to see why visitors call this the Golden City. But the gold isn't just in the decorations. It's in the way the honey-coloured morning light pools in the courtyards, in the warm glow of olive oil lamps visible through open windows, in the golden wheat that workers carry in baskets toward the granaries. Troy doesn't just have gold. It lives and breathes with a golden richness that makes everything feel abundant and blessed. You begin walking down the wide stone steps that lead from the upper city, where the palace and temples sit like crowns on the hill, toward the lower city where most people live and work. The steps are worn smooth by thousands of feet, and along their edges small wildflowers have found purchase between the stones, tiny purple blooms that seem to nod hello as you pass. The smell of baking bread draws you toward the baker's quarter, where ovens built into the ground send up gentle streams of sweet smoke. Here, a woman named Polixo kneads dough on a wooden table that's been polished smooth by years of use. Her arms are strong from the work, dusted white with flour up to her elbows. She hums an old song, something her grandmother taught her about sparrows finding grain after winter. Polixo has been baking bread in this same spot for 20 years. She knows exactly how long to let the dough rise on warm days versus cool ones, exactly how much wood to feed the fire to get the perfect golden crust. Her bread feeds families throughout this quarter of the city, and she knows all their preferences. Old Menon likes his bread crusty enough to dunk in wine. Little Astrid's mother always asks for the end pieces because that's the only part her daughter will eat. From the baker's quarter, you wander toward the weaver's workshops, where the soft rhythmic sound of looms creates a peaceful music all its own. Here, women sit in the doorways where the light is best. Their fingers are moving with practiced grace as they work bright threads into patterns. Some weave simple cloth for everyday tunics and cloaks. Others create elaborate tapestries meant for palace walls, their threads telling stories of gods and heroes. One weaver, an older woman named Cleo, specialises in a particular shade of purple that comes from shellfish gathered on distant shores. The dye is expensive, traded for Troy's famous horses or for the amber that comes down from the northern lands. Cleo's purple cloth will become robes for priests, sashes for nobles, perhaps even a cloak for one of King Priam's sons. But what's interesting is how Cleo talks while she works. She tells stories, not grand tales of gods and battles, but smaller stories about the people who will wear her cloth. She imagines the young bride who will wrap herself in the yellow wedding veil currently on her loom, wonders if the blue cloak she finished yesterday will keep its owner warm on sea voyages, hopes that the red tunic she's planning will make its wearer feel confident and strong. The market square buzzes with quiet activity. Merchants spread their wares on wooden tables and woven mats, jewellery that catches the light, pottery painted with dancing figures, leather goods soft as silk. The sounds blend into a comfortable murmur, coins clinking, people bargaining in friendly voices, children asking their mothers for honeyed dates. You notice how the merchants know their customers' names, ask about family members, remember preferences from previous visits. This isn't just buying and selling, it's a web of relationships that connects everyone in the city. The spice merchant saves the best cinnamon for the cook who works in the palace. The pottery maker always has a small clay horse, ready when little Demos comes with his father, because he knows the boy collects them. Near the fountain at the square's centre, old men gather to play board games and discuss the news. Their game boards are made of wood and ivory, worn smooth by countless matches. The pieces click softly as they move them, planning strategies with the same careful thought generals might use for battles. though these battles hurt nothing more than pride. They talk about practical things, whether the spring rains were good for the crops, if the new trade agreements with the Eastern kingdoms are fair, why young people today seem to walk so much faster than they used to. Occasionally, someone mentions rumours from the outside world, something about Greek ships gathering somewhere, or arguments between kings. But these distant troubles feel as remote as storms on the far horizon. In the residential quarters, houses cluster together like friends sharing secrets. The buildings are 2 or 3 stories tall, with flat roofs where families often sit in the evenings to catch the cool breeze. Courtyards are hidden behind modest doors, but through open windows you catch glimpses of private life. A mother teaching her daughter to spin wool, a grandfather carving a toy boat for his grandson, teenagers practicing dance steps for an upcoming festival. The gardens deserve special mention. Troy's soil is rich, fed by the rivers that flow nearby and protected by the mighty walls. Every house has some kind of garden, even if it's just a few pots on a windowsill. There are practical gardens full of onions, herbs and beans, but also gardens purely for beauty, roses that climb stone walls, lilies that fill the air with sweetness, grapevines that provide both fruit and shade. Water flows through the city in channels carved from stone, an engineering marvel that brings fresh water from mountain springs. The sound of running water is everywhere, not loud enough to be distracting, but present like a quiet song that reminds everyone of Troy's abundance. Children float small boats made of leaves down these channels, racing them from one intersection to the next. As afternoon approaches, the city's rhythm shifts slightly. Children begin to head home from their lessons with tutors and scribes. Craftsmen finish their daily projects and clean their tools. Women start thinking about evening meals, stepping out to their gardens to pick herbs or to the market for fish that boats brought in at dawn. The palace, visible from almost everywhere in the city, begins to show signs of evening activity. Smoke rises from its kitchens as cooks prepare dinner for the royal family and their guests. Guards change shifts with quiet efficiency, their bronze armour glinting as they walk their routes along the walls. But even the palace feels connected to the rest of the city. King Priam is known for walking through the streets, stopping to chat with merchants and craftsmen, asking after sick relatives, praising someone's new house or successful harvest. He's not a distant ruler locked away behind walls. He's a father to the city as much as to his own children. As evening settles over Troy, lamps begin to flicker in windows, creating a warm constellation of lights throughout the city. Families gather for dinner, sharing bread and wine, olive oil and cheese, fruits that taste like sunshine. The conversations are unhurried, jokes and gentle teasing, plans for tomorrow, stories about the day's small adventures. From somewhere in the distance comes the sound of music. Someone playing a lyre on a rooftop, a group of young people singing as they walk home from work. The music floats over the city like a blessing, mixing with the evening sounds of settling birds and the distant bleating of goats being brought in for the night. This is Troy in its golden time, not just wealthy but deeply alive. A city where people know each other's names and care about each other's stories, where work has meaning beyond mere survival, where beauty matters as much as usefulness, where the pace of life allows for both productivity and peace. It's a place where tradition and innovation dance together, where ancient crafts are practiced with pride, but new ideas are welcome too, where the gods feel present but not oppressive, part of daily life like the sunshine and the rain, where children grow up feeling safe and valued, where old people are respected for their wisdom, where everyone has a role to play in the community's story. As you stand on a high balcony watching the city settle into evening, you can understand why Cassandra fights so hard to save this place. It's not just buildings and walls she's trying to protect. It's this whole way of life, this community that has grown together like a garden over generations. And perhaps that's what makes her prophecies so tragic. She can see all of this. The golden light, the laughing children, the careful work of skilled hands, the quiet contentment of people living good lives. She can see it all turning to ash. But for now, in this peaceful evening hour, Troy continues its gentle dance of daily life, unaware of the shadows gathering beyond its walls. The golden days of Troy continue their peaceful rhythm, but something has changed in the wind that blows across the city walls. You find yourself once again in Cassandra's presence, but this time she stands not in the temple, but on the ramparts of Troy's great wall, staring out at something that makes her hands tremble. On the plain before the city, where for 10 long years Greek tents had clustered like a sprawling second city, there is now only emptiness. The siege that had become as familiar as weather has suddenly mysteriously ended. The Greek ships that dotted the shoreline like dark birds are gone. The cooking fires that had twinkled in the enemy camp each night have been cold for 3 days now. But they left something behind. Standing alone on the sandy plain, as if dropped from the sky by some giant's careless hand, is a horse. Not a living horse, though it's large enough that a living horse would look like a foal beside it, but a construction of wood and rope, of bronze fittings and painted eyes that seem to stare directly at Troy's gates. The horse is beautiful, there's no denying that. Its makers crafted it with the same skill that goes into temple statues or royal thrones. The wood has been polished until it gleams like honey, and artists have painted details that make it seem almost alive. Muscles that appear to ripple in the changing light, a mane that seems to flow in an impossible wind. To most of Troy's citizens, the horse looks like exactly what the Greeks claimed it was in the message they left behind, an offering to Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, meant to ensure their safe voyage home, a gift to ask forgiveness for 10 years of fighting, and perhaps to honour the bravery they had witnessed in Troy's defenders. But Cassandra sees something else entirely. Standing on the wall, her priestess robes whipping around her in the wind, she sees the horse's wooden belly split open like a seed pod. She sees Greek soldiers pouring out like dark water, their bronze armour black in the shadows, their spears catching moonlight like captured stars. She sees them moving through Troy's sleeping streets, silent as hunting cats, toward doors that will open trustingly because no one expects enemies inside the walls. The vision is so clear she can smell the oil they've rubbed into their armour to keep it from squeaking, can hear the careful whisper of their sandalled feet on stone, can see the signal fires they'll light to call their ships back from the island where they're hiding. She watches her city die in flames that haven't been lit yet, hears screams that haven't yet been voiced. She's been standing here since dawn, and now the sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that would be beautiful if they didn't remind her so much of fire. Below in the city, people are celebrating. The siege is over. The Greeks have given up and gone home. Troy has won. Already there's talk of bringing the horse inside the city. Some say it should go in the main square where everyone can admire the workmanship. Others think it belongs in Athena's temple since it was made in her honour. A few suggest the palace courtyard, where it could stand as a permanent reminder of Troy's victory over the greatest army the world has ever seen. Cassandra has tried to warn them. She started the moment the horse was discovered, rushing through the streets like a woman fleeing fire, grabbing people by their sleeves, looking into their eyes with desperate intensity. Don't trust it, she told them. It's not a gift, it's a trap. The Greeks haven't gone home. They're waiting. They're hiding. But Apollo's curse works as perfectly as ever. Her words slide off people's minds like water off polished marble. They hear her voice, but not her meaning. They see her urgency, but interpret it as the excitement of victory, rather than the panic of foreknowledge. Poor Cassandra, they whisper to each other when she passes. The stress of the siege has finally gotten to her. She can't believe it's really over. She has tried different approaches. She spoke to the guards, suggesting they examine the horse carefully before bringing it inside, but they heard only a suggestion to admire the craftsmanship more closely. She went to the priests, warning them that the gods might not approve of accepting gifts from enemies, but they heard only enthusiasm for proper religious ceremonies to bless the horse's arrival. She even tried to convince her father, King Priam, approaching him in his throne room where the afternoon light streams through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. She knelt before his throne, not in supplication, but to put herself at his eye level, to make him really look at her as she spoke. "Father," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "I've been praying about the horse. The omens are unclear. Perhaps we should leave it where it is, as a monument to the war's end, rather than bringing it inside our walls." Priam's weathered face softened with paternal concern. He reached out to touch her cheek, his fingers gentle, but his mind already dismissing her words. "My dear daughter, your devotion to the gods does you credit. Of course we'll perform all the proper ceremonies before moving the horse. The priests will purify it, we'll make the correct offerings, everything will be done according to tradition." She tried again. "But what if it's not really a gift? What if the Greeks? The Greeks are gone, Cassandra." His voice held the patient tone adults use with children who are afraid of shadows. "Their ships sailed 3 days ago. Our scouts have confirmed it. The war is over, and we have won." Now, as the sun sets on what may be Troy's last peaceful evening, Cassandra stands alone on the wall, watching the horse as if she could make it burst into flames with the force of her stare. She has exhausted every approach she can think of. She has tried speaking loudly and softly, publicly and privately, to individuals and to crowds. The cruel irony is that some part of her gift seems to work in reverse. The more desperately she tries to convince people, the more convinced they become that she's wrong. It's as if Apollo's curse has a malicious intelligence of its own, designed not just to make her unbelievable, but to make her most important truths seem like her most obvious delusions. As the first stars appear in the darkening sky, she hears footsteps on the stone stairs behind her. Her brother Hector joins her on the rampart, his presence solid and comforting. Of all her family, he's the one who listens to her most patiently, even if he doesn't believe what she says. "You've been up here all day," he says quietly, not looking at the horse but at her face, reading the exhaustion and despair written there. "You should eat something. Rest." "How can I rest?" The words come out more bitter than she intended. "How can I eat while watching my city prepare to celebrate its own destruction?" Hector sighs. He's tired too. 10 years of war have aged him beyond his years, carved lines around his eyes and streaked his beard with premature grey. "Cassandra, I know the end of the siege feels too good to be true. We've all been fighting for so long that peace seems impossible. But sometimes wars do end. Sometimes enemies do give up and go home." She turns to look at him, this brother she loves so much, whose death she has seen in visions more times than she can count. In the starlight, his face looks young and hopeful, ready to believe in victory and peace, and the possibility of a future without bloodshed. "What if I'm right?" she whispers. "Just this once. What if I'm right about something that matters?" He reaches out and takes her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her cold ones. "Then we'll face whatever comes, as we always have, together, as a family, as a city." It's not the answer she needs, but it's the only one he can give. The curse ensures that even her beloved brother cannot truly hear her warnings, cannot take the action that might save them all. Below them, Troy settles into evening with the relaxed joy of a city that believes its troubles are over. Children play games in the streets, their laughter echoing off the buildings. Merchants plan new trading expeditions to lands they couldn't reach during the war. Young couples make wedding plans they had postponed until peace returned. Tomorrow, the horse will be brought inside the city. There will be ceremonies and celebrations, speeches about victory and the favour of the gods. The wooden horse will be installed in whatever place of honour the council decides upon, and Troy will go to sleep believing itself safe behind its mighty walls. But Cassandra will not sleep. She will keep watch, waiting for the moment when her visions become reality, when the horse's belly opens and her city's doom comes spilling out. And perhaps, in that terrible moment when it's too late for warnings, someone will finally look at her and understand that she has been telling the truth all along. As she stands there under the stars, watching the horse's painted eyes seem to blink in the shifting shadows, you might wonder what it would feel like to know the future but be powerless to change it. To see the people you love walking toward disaster with smiles on their faces, believing themselves saved when they are actually lost. As Cassandra keeps her lonely vigil on the city walls, the temples of Troy continue their ancient rhythms, unaware that this may be their last night of peace. Let us walk quietly through these sacred spaces, where the gods feel close enough to touch, and every stone holds centuries of prayer. You descend from the walls into the temple district, where the buildings seem to glow with their own inner light even in the darkness. Oil lamps flicker in bronze holders, casting dancing shadows on marble columns that rise like forest trees towards star-filled sky. The air is thick with the scent of incense, frankincense from distant lands, local herbs dried and ground by patient hands, cedar wood that releases its sweetness as it burns. The largest temple belongs to Athena, goddess of wisdom and warfare, protector of cities. Her statue dominates the inner chamber, carved from ivory and gold by craftsmen who spent years perfecting every fold of her robes, every curl of her hair. She stands 15 feet tall, her spear raised not in threat but in protection, her owl perched on her shoulder with eyes that seem to watch everything. But it's not the grandeur that strikes you most. It's the intimacy. People don't just visit this temple for major festivals or life-changing ceremonies. They come daily, as naturally as they visit the market or check on their gardens. A mother stops to thank Athena for her son's safe return from a trading voyage. A young woman asks for wisdom in choosing between two suitors who both seem kind and worthy. An old man simply sits quietly in the goddess's presence, finding peace in the cool marble and gentle lamplight. Near Athena's temple stands a smaller shrine to Apollo, where Cassandra serves as priestess when she's not wrestling with visions of doom. This morning, before she went to the walls to stare at the wooden horse, she lit the sacred fires and prepared the offerings that people have brought. Small clay figures, cups of wine, honey cakes shaped like lyres. The priest who assists her, an elderly man named Panthus, tends the shrine with the movements that have become as automatic as breathing. He has served Apollo for 40 years, through wars and peace, good harvests and lean times. His hands shake slightly now as he arranges the offerings, but his voice remains strong when he chants the ancient prayers. Panthus worries about Cassandra. He sees how the visions drain her, how she struggles against the curse that makes her truths sound like ravings. He has tried to speak to other priests about it, suggesting that perhaps the gods have given her knowledge that requires careful interpretation rather than dismissal. But even among those who serve the gods, Apollo's curse holds. They hear his concerns as the worry of an old man for a troubled young woman, nothing more. In the temple of Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, the atmosphere is softer, warmer. Rose petals carpet the floors, and the walls are painted with scenes of gardens in eternal bloom. Young couples come here to ask for blessings on their marriages, to request that their love last through all the challenges life might bring. Tonight, a pair of lovers kneel before Aphrodite's altar. The young man is a bronzesmith who creates armour and tools, his hands strong from working metal. The woman weaves cloth that people say is nearly as beautiful as Aphrodite's own robes. They plan to marry when the spring festival comes, and they've brought offerings of their own work. A small bronze mirror from him, a length of silk dyed the colour of sunset from her. The priestess who serves here, a middle-aged woman named Theano, performs the blessing with gentle joy. She has seen hundreds of couples make such requests, has watched some of their marriages flourish while others withered, but she never grows cynical about love, never stops believing in its power to transform ordinary lives into something divine. As she sprinkles rosewater over the couple's joined hands, Theano offers a prayer that is both ritual and heartfelt. May your love be like the olive tree, deep-rooted, long-lasting, bearing fruit in all seasons. May you find in each other not just passion, but friendship, not just beauty, but strength. The Temple of Artemis sits at the edge of the district, where the city meets the wilder lands beyond the walls. This goddess prefers spaces that feel closer to nature, so her temple is built around a natural spring that bubbles up from deep in the earth. The water is considered sacred, used for purification rituals and healing ceremonies. Women often come to Artemis for help with childbirth, since the goddess is known to protect mothers and children. Tonight, a young woman named Creusa sits by the sacred spring, her hands resting on her swollen belly. This is her first child, and she's both excited and afraid. The older women in her family have told her stories about the pains and dangers of birth, but also about the fierce joy of holding your baby for the first time. The Priestess of Artemis, a woman who has never married but has assisted at hundreds of births, sits with Creusa in comfortable silence. Sometimes the god's help comes through words and ceremonies, but sometimes it comes simply through the presence of someone who understands, who can hold space for fear and hope to exist side by side. Near the centre of the temple district stands the shrine of Hestia, goddess of the hearth and home. It's the simplest of all the temples. No grand statue, no elaborate decorations, just a circular room with a fire that has burned continuously for 300 years. The flame is tended by a rotating group of citizens, each family taking responsibility for keeping it alive during their assigned days. Tonight, it's the turn of an old couple whose children have grown and moved away. They sit beside the eternal flame, talking quietly about small things, their grandson's first words, whether the olive trees will produce. Well, this year, a cat that has adopted them despite their protests that they don't need a pet. The eternal flame represents more than divine presence. It symbolises the continuity of life, the way traditions and love pass from one generation to the next. As long as the flame burns, Troy endures. As long as people care enough to tend it, the city has a heart that cannot be conquered. But perhaps the most mysterious temple in Troy is the one dedicated to fate itself, the Moirai, the three sisters who spin the threads of destiny. This temple is built underground, reached by stone steps that spiral down into the earth. The air here is cooler, heavy with the weight of prophecy and the knowledge of things that cannot be changed. Few people visit the Moirai willingly. Their truths are too large, too final. But sometimes, when someone is desperate enough, they descend the spiral stairs and ask the three sisters what the future holds. The answers come not in words, but in symbols. Patterns in spilled wine, shapes in the way incense smoke curls, meaning hidden in the flicker of lamp flames. Cassandra has been here many times, hoping to find some way to break Apollo's curse, or at least understand its purpose. But the Moirai offer no comfort, no easy solutions. They show her only what she already knows, that some gifts are also burdens, that some truths are too heavy for the world to bear, that love sometimes requires accepting powerlessness. As dawn approaches, the temples begin to show signs of the coming day. Priests and priestesses arrive to tend the morning fires, to prepare for the day's ceremonies and offerings. The citizens of Troy will come as they always do, bringing their hopes and fears, their gratitude and their requests for help. They will pray for good weather and successful harvests, for the health of their families and the prosperity of their city. They will thank the gods for the end of the long siege, for the peace that seems to stretch ahead of them like a calm sea. They will ask for continued protection, never imagining that the greatest danger in Troy's history stands just outside their gates, painted to look like a gift. The priests will perform their duties with the same devotion they have shown for years, lighting fires, pouring wine, chanting prayers that connect them to something larger than themselves. They will comfort the troubled, celebrate with the joyful, and maintain the sacred traditions that make Troy more than just a city built of stone and bronze. And in Apollo's temple, When Cassandra finally returns from her vigil on the walls, she will kneel before the altar and pray once more for the power to save her people. She will ask her God, the one who gave her the gift of prophecy and the curse of disbelief, to show her some way to break through the wall of indifference that surrounds her warnings. But Apollo's statue will remain silent, its golden face beautiful and remote, offering no answers except the ones she already carries in her heart. The truth will remain the truth, whether anyone believes it or not. Love will remain love, whether it has the power to change fate or not, and the temples will continue their eternal function, to provide a place where humans can touch the divine, even when the divine seems too vast and mysterious to understand. As you stand in the quiet temple district, listening to the soft sounds of morning prayers beginning, you might wonder what it means to serve gods who sometimes seem to care more about cosmic balance than human happiness. What does faith look like when it offers no easy comfort, when it demands that you keep trying even when success seems impossible? The first pale light of dawn finds two figures in the palace garden, Cassandra, still sleepless from her night of watching, and her brother Hector, preparing for what neither of them knows will be one of their last conversations. The garden is peaceful at this hour, with dew still clinging to the leaves and the air soft with the scent of jasmine. Hector sits on a stone bench beside a fountain that trickles quietly, its sound like gentle laughter in the morning stillness. He's removing his armour piece by piece, the bronze breastplate that bears the marks of countless battles, the greaves that protected his shins, the helmet with its nodding horsehair plume. His movements are careful and practised, each piece cleaned and checked before being set aside. You notice how different the siblings look in the morning light. Cassandra appears fragile, almost translucent with exhaustion and the weight of unshared knowledge. Her priestess robes seem too large for her slight frame, and her eyes hold depths of sadness that no young woman should carry. Hector, by contrast, radiates solid strength. Even without his armour he looks every inch the warrior. Broad shoulders, arms marked with old scars, hands that know the weight of sword and spear. But there's gentleness in him too, visible in the way he looks at his sister, in the patient attention he gives to her troubled words. "You didn't sleep," he observes, not accusingly, but with the concern of someone who loves her. He dips a cloth in the fountain's clean water and hands it to her. "At least wash your face, you'll feel better." Cassandra takes the cloth gratefully, pressing its coolness against her eyes. For a moment she lets herself pretend that she's just an ordinary young woman whose biggest worry is whether she's tired, whether she needs to eat more, whether the young priest who serves in Apollo's temple might someday work up the courage to speak to her about something other than ritual duties. But the illusion doesn't last. Through the garden walls she can hear the sounds of the city preparing for celebration. Today the wooden horse will be brought inside Troy's gates. Today her visions will begin their transformation from nightmare to reality. "Hector," she says quietly, "do you remember when we were children, and I used to have dreams that came true?" He smiles at the memory. "You dreamed that old Nestor's dog would have puppies, and 3 days later she did. You dreamed that the fig tree in the courtyard would be struck by lightning, and that summer it happened exactly as you said. Those were small things, easy things. Dreams about puppies and trees couldn't hurt anyone." She looks at him with desperate hope. "But you believed me then. You remember that I was right." "I remember." His voice is gentle but puzzled. "But Cassandra, those were just coincidences, lucky guesses, the kind of dreams any child might have." Even now, even with his own memories of her childhood accuracy, Apollo's curse works to cloud his understanding. He can remember the facts but not their significance, can acknowledge her past successes while dismissing their meaning. Cassandra tries a different approach. "Tell me about the war, Hector. Tell me why you think the Greeks really left." He leans back against the fountain's edge, considering the question seriously. This is something he can discuss without the supernatural complications that make conversations about prophecy so difficult. "They were tired," he says finally. 10 years is a long time to be away from home, to be fighting for a cause that started with someone else's grievance. Their supplies were running low, their leaders were arguing among themselves, and they had taken heavy losses in the recent battles. He pauses, watching a bee work its way through the jasmine blossoms. But more than that, I think they realised they couldn't win. Not the way they expected to. They came here thinking Troy would fall quickly, that our walls were just stone and mortar like any other cities. They didn't understand that Troy's real strength isn't in its defences, it's in its people. This is why people follow Hector into battle, why soldiers will charge impossible positions because he asks them to. He understands that war isn't just about weapons and tactics, it's about the reasons people fight, the things they're willing to die to protect. Every time they attacked our walls, he continues, they weren't just fighting our army. They were fighting every baker who makes bread for the soldiers, every mother who sends her son to defend the gates, every child who waves from the windows as the warriors march past. They were fighting the whole life of the city, and that's something you cannot defeat with bronze and iron. Cassandra listens to her brother's analysis, hearing both his wisdom and his blind spot. He understands the heart of Troy's strength, but he cannot see how that same strength could be turned against them. He cannot imagine that the Greeks might have found a way to make Troy's trusting nature, its generous spirit, into a weapon for its own destruction. What if they found another way, she asks. Not bronze and iron, but something else. Something that used our virtues against us. Hector considers this seriously, as he considers all her questions. But she can see the curse working in his mind, turning her genuine insight into abstract speculation. You mean like treachery? Someone opening the gates from inside? He shakes his head. There isn't a person in Troy who would do such a thing. I know them all, Cassandra. I've fought beside them, eaten at their tables, held their children. Their loyalty isn't bought or forced. It comes from love. He's right, of course. Troy's people are loyal, their love for their city genuine and deep. But loyalty and love can be deceived, can be tricked into making choices that serve their enemies' purposes. A servant approaches through the garden paths, bowing respectfully before speaking. Lord Hector, your father requests your presence in the throne room. The council is meeting to discuss the ceremonies for the horse. Hector nods and begins putting his armour back on, the bronze pieces clicking softly as they settle into their familiar positions. Cassandra watches him transform from her gentle brother into Troy's greatest warrior, the man who has held the Greek army at bay for 10 long years. Come with me, he says as he adjusts his sword belt. Your voice should be heard in the council. You're Apollo's priestess. Your insights about religious matters could be valuable. For a moment hope flickers in Cassandra's chest, maybe in the formal setting of the council chamber, with her official role as priestess to support her. Maybe this time her warnings will carry weight. But even as the hope forms, she knows it's futile. Apollo's curse doesn't recognise official positions or formal ceremonies. It works as perfectly in throne rooms as in markets, among kings as among commoners. Still, she rises to follow him. What else can she do? Even if her words fall on deaf ears, even if her presence changes nothing, she must try. She owes that much to the city she loves, to the brother who listens to her even when he cannot hear her. As they walk toward the palace together, Hector speaks quietly about his plans for peacetime. He wants to travel, to see the lands beyond Troy's borders, not as a warrior, but as a curious observer. He wants to learn new ways of growing crops, new techniques for metalworking, new songs and stories to bring back to his people. I've been fighting for so long, he says. I've almost forgotten what it feels like to build things instead of defending them. There's a whole world out there, Cassandra. Places where they make music we've never heard, where they've solved problems we're still struggling with. His enthusiasm is infectious, his vision of the future bright with possibility. He talks about establishing new trade routes, forming alliances based on mutual benefit rather than military necessity, creating a peace that could last for generations. Cassandra listens and tries to share his optimism. tries to imagine the future he describes. But layered over his hopeful words, she sees other images. His body lying still on blood-soaked ground, his armour stripped away by enemy hands, his dreams of peace dying with him in the dust outside Troy's walls. She has seen his death so many times in her visions that she knows it like a familiar song. She knows the exact moment when his strength will fail, knows the name of the man who will kill him, knows how his horse will stand over his body as if keeping guard over its fallen master. But she also knows something her visions don't show. How much joy he finds in planning for a future he won't live to see. How his hope lights up his face even as they walk into the council chamber, where Troy's doom will be sealed with ceremony and celebration. Perhaps that's the real tragedy of prophecy, not just seeing the future, but seeing how beautiful the present moment can be even when you know it won't last. Watching someone you love make plans and dream dreams, knowing that their time is short but unable to warn them without sounding mad. As they reach the palace doors, Hector pauses and looks back at the garden where they shared their last quiet conversation. The sun is fully up now, painting everything in warm gold, making the flowers seem to glow within a light. "It's going to be a beautiful day," he says with satisfaction. "A perfect day for celebration." And Cassandra, following him into the shadows of the palace, wonders if love means agreeing with him, letting him enjoy his beautiful perfect day, or if love means trying once more to shatter his peace with truths that no one wants to hear. While Hector and Cassandra make their way to the council chamber, let us turn our attention to the women who form the quiet backbone of Troy, those whose hands shape daily life, whose work continues regardless of wars or peace, whose strength often goes unnoticed, but never fails. In a workshop near the Temple District, 3 generations of women sit at their looms as the morning light grows stronger. The eldest, Hecuba's sister Penthesilea, has been weaving for 60 years. Her fingers move with automatic grace across the threads, creating patterns she learned as a girl but has perfected into something uniquely her own. Beside her sits her daughter Cleo, whom we met before working with that precious purple dye. Today she's creating something special, a cloak meant as a gift for King Priam, woven from the finest wool and dyed with colours that shift from deep blue to wine red, depending on how the light catches them. It's taken her months of careful work, and she hopes to present it at today's celebration. The youngest weaver is Cleo's daughter Alexia, barely 16, but already showing the family gift for creating beauty from simple threads. She's working on her first major piece, a tapestry that tells the story of Troy's founding, with threads of gold for the city's walls and silver for the rivers that flow nearby. As they work, they talk, not about grand events or political matters, but about the small details that make up the texture of life. Penthesilea mentions that her neighbour's baby is finally sleeping through the night. Cleo worries that her husband has been coughing more lately, wonders if she should ask the temple healers for advice. Alexia chatters about a young man who smiled at her in the market, trying to sound casual while her cheeks grow pink. But underneath their ordinary conversation, there's something else, a shared awareness that they are part of something larger than their individual lives. Their work doesn't just clothe bodies, it connects Troy to a tradition that stretches back generations. When someone wraps themselves in cloth these women have woven, they're surrounded by the accumulated skill, love and artistry of countless unnamed craftswomen. Each thread tells a story. The wool came from sheep raised on hills outside the city, tended by shepherds who know each animal's personality. The dye was mixed by merchants who travelled dangerous roads to bring rare ingredients from distant lands. The patterns were passed down from mothers to daughters, each generation adding their own small innovations while preserving the essential beauty that makes Trojan cloth famous throughout the known world. In the baker's quarter, Polyxo has been working since before dawn, her ovens glowing like small suns in the early morning darkness. Today's bread needs to be special. The city is celebrating, and celebration bread requires different ingredients, different techniques, different care. She's made honey cakes shaped like horses, not knowing how prophetic this choice will prove. Sweet rolls studded with dates and almonds, and loaves braided into complex patterns that look almost too beautiful to eat. Her hands are dusted with flour up to her elbows, and her face shines with sweat from the heat of the ovens, but her expression is one of deep satisfaction. Baking is both craft and art, requiring precision in measurement, but also intuition about timing, weather, the particular behaviour of each batch of grain. Polixo has learned to read the subtle signs that tell her when dough has risen enough, when the oven temperature is exactly right, when to add just a pinch more salt or honey to achieve the perfect flavour. But more than technique, baking requires something else, an understanding of what food means to people. Bread isn't just nutrition, it's comfort, tradition, the taste of home. When a mother breaks bread with her children, when friends share a meal, when a community celebrates together, the baker's work becomes part of love itself. Other women join Polixo as the morning progresses, neighbours who come to help with the celebration preparations, daughters and daughters-in-law who carry on family recipes, friends who simply enjoy working together. The bakery becomes a gathering place where women can talk freely while their hands stay busy. They discuss their husbands and children, share remedies for common ailments, exchange news and gossip. But they also talk about deeper things, their hopes for their families, their fears about the future, their observations about how the city is changing now that the war is over. One woman mentions that her son wants to become a merchant, to travel to the far ports that were closed during the siege. Another worries about her aging parents, wonders how to care for them as they become more frail. A third is excited because her daughter is learning to read, working with a tutor who believes girls should have the same education as boys. Their conversations weave together like threads in a tapestry, creating a picture of a community that is alive, growing, adapting to change while holding on to the values that define it. These women may not sit in council chambers or lead armies, but they are the ones who will determine what kind of place Troy becomes in peacetime. Near the market square, a different kind of women's gathering takes place. Here the midwives and healers meet to share knowledge and prepare medicines. These women deal with life's most fundamental experiences: birth, illness, death, and their wisdom is sought by rich and poor alike. The head midwife, a woman named Thalassa, has delivered half the children in Troy. Her hands have guided new life into the world thousands of times, and her experience tells her things that no medical text could teach. She knows which herbs ease difficult births, which positions help when labour stalls, which signs mean danger, and which indicate normal, healthy progress. But Thalassa's real gift isn't technical, it's her ability to provide calm strength when people are most vulnerable. She has sat with women through nights of pain and fear, has helped them find the courage to push through the hardest moments, has been the first to place newborns in their mother's arms. Today, she's training 2 younger women who want to learn the midwife's art. She shows them how to prepare birthing rooms, how to brew teas that ease pain without harming the baby, how to massage backs and feet to provide comfort. But mostly, she teaches them about patience, how to wait with women through the long process of birth, how to trust that nature knows what it's doing, how to intervene only when truly necessary. Birth is like the tide, she tells her students as they grind herbs in marble mortars. It has its own rhythm, its own timing. Our job isn't to control it, but to support it, to make sure it happens as safely and comfortably as possible. In another part of the city, women are engaged in the sad but necessary work of mourning. Even though the war is over, there are still families grieving for sons and husbands lost in the final battles. The professional mourners, women skilled in the ancient rituals of grief, help these families honour their dead and begin the long process of healing. These women know the traditional songs, the proper ceremonies, the right words to speak at different stages of mourning. But more importantly, they understand grief itself, how it moves through people like weather, how it changes but never completely disappears, how it can be shared and thereby made more bearable. One mourner, An elderly woman named Andromache's Aunt Croesus has spent her life helping others say goodbye to their loved ones. She has learned that grief has its own wisdom, that trying to rush or avoid it only makes it more painful. Instead, she helps people lean into their sorrow, to let it wash over them like waves, knowing that eventually the tide will recede and leave them changed but not destroyed. As the day progresses and the celebration preparations continue, all these women, weavers and bakers, healers and mourners, contribute their skills to Troy's moment of joy. They may not understand the political complexities that led to the war's end, may not know the strategic importance of various battles, but they understand something else: how to create beauty and provide comfort, how to sustain life and honour death, how to build a community that can endure whatever comes. Their work is often invisible, taken for granted the way people take for granted the air they breathe or the ground they walk on. But without these women, Troy would be just an empty shell of walls and buildings. With them, it becomes a living organism, a place where human beings can grow and flourish and find meaning in their daily lives. As evening approaches and the wooden horse stands ready to be brought inside the city gates, these women prepare for celebration with the same care they bring to all their work. They arrange their finest textiles, set out their most delicious foods, prepare their voices for songs of joy and victory. They cannot know that their work will soon take on new meaning, that their skills in weaving will be needed to create burial shrouds, that their bread will feed refugees fleeing burning homes, that their knowledge of healing will be tested by wounds beyond anything they've encountered, that their expertise in mourning will be overwhelmed by the scope of coming grief. For now they work in hope and celebration, their hands creating beauty and comfort as they have always done. And perhaps that itself is a kind of prophecy. The knowledge that whatever comes, there will always be people who choose to build rather than destroy, to nurture rather than harm, to find ways of making life more beautiful even in the darkest times. Far from Troy's celebrating streets, hidden on the island of Tenedos, where Greek ships wait like patient hunters, another kind of divination takes place. Here, the same gods who watch over Troy also watch over their enemies, and the signs they send are read by different eyes with different hopes. You find yourself in the pre-dawn darkness on the rocky shore of Tenedos, where the Greek fleet has been hiding for 3 days now, waiting for the signal that will tell them their wooden horse has been accepted into Troy. The ships rest at anchor like sleeping seabirds, their bronze prows catching the first pale light of morning. On the largest ship, Agamemnon stands with his council of war, but they are not looking at maps or weapons. Instead, they watch the sky with the same intensity that generals usually reserve for battlefield tactics. Above them, birds wheel and cry in patterns that seem random to untrained eyes, but speak volumes to those who know how to interpret the language of divine signs. The Greeks have their own prophets, their own ways of reading the will of the gods. Chief among them is Calchas, a priest whose gift for interpreting omens brought the Greek army to Troy in the first place. It was Calchas who declared that the winds preventing their departure from Aulis would only change if Agamemnon sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia. It was Calchas who proclaimed that Troy would fall, though he didn't specify when or how. Now, as the crucial moment approaches, Calchas studies every sign the gods send. He watches the flight of eagles, noting how they soar or dive, whether they hunt alone or in pairs. He observes the behaviour of dolphins in the waters around the ships. Do they play or swim urgently? Do they approach the boats or avoid them? The science of reading omens is complex, built on generations of careful observation and interpretation. Different birds carry different meanings. Eagles speak of royal power and divine favour. Ravens bring messages about war and death. Doves tell of love and peace. But the same bird can mean different things depending on countless variables: the time of day, the direction of flight, what the bird carries in its beak, how it calls or remains silent. This morning Calchas notes a pair of hawks circling high above the fleet. They ride the wind currents with effortless grace, occasionally crying out in voices that sound almost conversational. To the untrained observer, they're simply hunting, looking for fish or small mammals. But Calchas sees something more specific in their behaviour. They circle clockwise, he murmurs to Agamemnon, pointing skyward with a staff topped by silver symbols. Moving from east to west, following the sun's path, this indicates divine approval for actions taken in proper order according to fate's design. Agamemnon nods, though you can see tension in the way he grips his sword hilt. He has been a king for many years, has learned to project confidence even when doubt gnaws at him. The plan they've set in motion is audacious beyond anything attempted before. To end a 10-year siege not through strength of arms but through deception. To turn Troy's greatest virtue into the instrument of its destruction. "And the dolphins?" asks Odysseus, the mastermind behind the wooden horse strategy. He stands slightly apart from the other leaders, his eyes sharp with intelligence and calculation. Unlike Agamemnon, who commands through royal authority, or Achilles, who leads through physical prowess, Odysseus influences through cleverness, and he knows that cleverness requires understanding all available information, including divine signs. Calchas turns his attention to the waters around the ships, where indeed dolphins have been visible since dawn. A pod of them swims in loose formation near the flagship, occasionally breaching the surface in displays that send sparkling water droplets through the morning air. They swim toward land, the prophet observes, toward Troy. This suggests that the gods approve of our movement in that direction. But see how they surface and dive in rhythm. This indicates that success will come through concealment, followed by revelation, hidden truth that merges at the proper moment. The interpretation seems almost too perfect, too aligned with their strategy. But that's how divine signs work, according to Greek understanding. The gods don't send random messages, but rather confirmations and warnings related to specific human actions and decisions. Other omens demand attention as well. During the night, several soldiers reported dreams that seemed significant. One dreamed of wooden ships sailing through stone walls. Another saw olive trees growing from bronze armour. A third watched wolves and sheep drinking peacefully from the same stream. Each dream requires careful analysis. The ships sailing through walls could represent their strategy of entering Troy through deception rather than force. The olive trees growing from armour might suggest that peace will come from war, that their military actions will ultimately lead to reconciliation. The wolves and sheep drinking together could indicate that enemies will soon be united, though whether as friends or in death remains unclear. But dream interpretation is notoriously difficult, subject to multiple meanings and easy self-deception. Calchas considers each vision carefully, looking for patterns that connect them to other signs, searching for the consistent message that underlies seemingly contradictory symbols. As the sun climbs higher, new omens appear. A fishing boat from a nearby island approaches the fleet, its crew calling out that they've seen strange lights over Troy during the night. Not the usual cook fires and oil lamps, but coloured lights that danced in the sky above the city's walls. Such lights often indicate divine activity, gods making their presence known at moments of great importance. But what kind of divine activity? Approval or warning? Celebration or mourning? The lights could mean that the gods are blessing Troy's celebration of peace, or they could signal that divine powers are gathering for the city's destruction. Calchas questions the fisherman carefully. What colours were the lights? How did they move? How long did they last? Did they appear suddenly or fade gradually? Each detail adds to the overall interpretation, like pieces of a puzzle that slowly reveal their complete picture. Blue and gold, the lead fisherman reports, like dawn light, but stronger. They moved in spirals, rising from the centre of the city toward the heavens. They lasted perhaps the time it takes to cook a fish, then faded like morning mist. Blue and gold are the colours associated with several gods. Zeus with his golden light and sky-blue robes, Athena with her golden owl and blue wisdom, Apollo with his golden music and blue prophecy. The spiral movement suggests divine ascension, power rising from earth to heaven. The brief duration indicates a momentary intervention rather than permanent divine presence. Putting all the signs together, Calchas begins to form an interpretation. The gods are actively involved in the events unfolding at Troy. They approve of the Greek strategy, but also honour the city that is about to fall. Divine justice is at work, not the simple justice of punishment, but the complex justice of fate fulfilling itself according to patterns established long ago. Troy must fall because the cosmic balance requires it. The city has grown too powerful, too proud, too removed from the ordinary struggles that keep mortals humble. But it will not fall dishonourably. The very trick that defeats it also demonstrates the cleverness and courage of its destroyers, ensuring that Troy's doom comes with respect for its strength. The signs are favourable, Calchas announces to the assembled leaders. The gods have given their approval for what we plan to do, but they also remind us that we destroy something precious, something that has earned their protection. We must proceed with honour, not cruelty. Victory without mercy would turn divine favour into divine wrath. This interpretation satisfies the Greek commanders for different reasons. Agamemnon hears confirmation that his long siege will finally succeed. Odysseus hears validation of his clever strategy. The other leaders hear assurance that they fight with divine support rather than divine opposition. But reading omens is like reading poetry. The same signs can carry multiple meanings, and the future has a way of revealing interpretations that no one anticipated. Perhaps the gods are indeed approving the Greek strategy, or perhaps they are simply observing, recording events for later judgment, allowing mortals to choose their actions while ensuring that those actions carry appropriate consequences. As the Greek ships wait hidden near Tenedos, their commanders reading omens in the dawn sky, let us step backward in time to understand how this moment came to be. 10 years is a long time to spend fighting over a single city, long enough for children to grow into warriors, for young men to become grey-bearded veterans, for an entire generation to know nothing but the rhythm of siege warfare. You find yourself standing on the walls of Troy in the early days of the siege, when the Greek ships first darkened the horizon like a storm cloud that refused to pass. The city's defenders line the ramparts, pointing at the foreign vessels, counting their numbers with growing unease. 50 ships, then 100, then so many that the harbour looks like a forest of masts swaying in the wind. King Priam stands at the highest tower, his royal robes fluttering in the sea breeze, watching as the Greeks establish their camp on the plain below. Even from this distance you can see the organised efficiency of their landing, soldiers forming ranks, horses being led from transport ships, tents rising in neat rows like a temporary city built for war. In those first days there's still hope that diplomacy might resolve the crisis. Messengers travel back and forth between the Greek camp and Troy's gates, carrying offers and counter-offers, threats and promises. The dispute, after all, began with a personal matter, Paris taking Helen from her husband Menelaus. Surely personal matters can be resolved without destroying cities. But as weeks turn to months, it becomes clear that something larger is at work here. The Greeks don't just want Helen back, they want to humble Troy, to break the power of a city that has grown too wealthy, too influential, too confident in its own strength. And Troy's people, for their part, cannot bring themselves to surrender what they see as their rightful prince's happiness to appease foreign demands. So the siege begins in earnest, and with it comes a strange new way of life for everyone involved. War, it turns out, is not the constant clash of bronze on bronze that poets sing about. Most of war is waiting. Long, tedious, sometimes desperate waiting, punctuated by brief moments of violence and terror. The Greeks established their camp with military precision, digging earthworks and building palisades, creating a small city of their own, complete with workshops, cooking areas, and spaces for storing supplies. Ships arrive regularly from Greece, bringing fresh troops, food, weapons, and news from home. The camp becomes a permanent settlement, as organised and functional as any peaceful town. Within Troy's walls, life adapts to the reality of siege. The great gates that once welcomed merchants and travellers from across the known world now stay barred shut, opened only for carefully planned military sorties. Trade routes that brought silk from the east and amber from the north are severed, forcing the city to rely on supplies brought by ships that can slip past Greek patrols under cover of darkness. You walk through Troy's streets in the second year of the siege and notice how the city has changed. Market stalls that once displayed exotic goods from distant lands now focus on practical necessities, preserved foods, leather for armour repair, bronze for weapons and tools. Craftsmen who used to create beautiful objects for pleasure now turn their skills toward war supplies. The women of Troy organise themselves with quiet efficiency, taking over many tasks traditionally performed by men who are now needed on the walls. They learn to make arrows, to prepare medicines for wounded soldiers, to preserve food for the long months when fresh supplies might not arrive. Children who should be playing games instead learn to carry messages, to help with simple crafts, to stay quiet during Greek attacks. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about the siege is how normal it becomes. Human beings, it seems, can adapt to almost any circumstance if it lasts long enough. By the third year, Troy has developed routines that make siege life feel almost ordinary. Farmers work small plots of land within the city walls, growing vegetables in courtyard gardens and on rooftops. Merchants trade goods brought by blockade runners, their prices inflated but their services still valued. The daily rhythm of siege warfare becomes as predictable as sunrise and sunset. Greek attacks usually come in the early morning, when the light is good for archery but the defenders are still drowsy. Troy's soldiers learn to sleep in shifts, always keeping enough men alert to sound the alarm and man the walls. Counterattacks happen in late afternoon, when the Greeks might be tired from their own morning efforts. Between battles, strange moments of peace emerge. Greek and Trojan soldiers sometimes meet in the neutral ground between camp and city to exchange news, to trade for particular goods, even to compete in athletic contests that both sides can enjoy. These informal truces never last long, but they remind everyone that the men trying to kill each other are not so different after all. You observe one such meeting in the fourth year of the siege, when a Greek herald approaches Troy's gates under a flag of truce. He brings news that interests both sides, word of events in the wider world, reports of other wars and political changes that affect everyone regardless of which side they support. For a brief hour, enemies become simply people sharing information about the world they all inhabit. The siege creates its own heroes and legends. Hector becomes known not just for his skill in battle, but for his steady leadership during the long months of waiting. He walks the walls every morning, checking defences and encouraging guards, his presence a reminder that Troy's strength comes from its people working together. When supplies run low, he makes sure that food is distributed fairly. When morale falters, he finds ways to remind everyone what they're fighting to protect. On the Greek side, different leaders handle the prolonged campaign in different ways. Agamemnon focuses on logistics and strategy, ensuring that supplies continue to flow from Greece, and that the army maintains discipline despite frustration over the war's length. Achilles becomes increasingly impatient with the slow pace, preferring direct confrontation to the patient work of siegecraft. Odysseus, meanwhile, studies Troy with the careful attention of someone solving a complex puzzle. He watches the city's routines, notes the patterns of guard changes and supply deliveries, searches for weaknesses that might be exploited. It's Odysseus who first suggests that Troy's greatest strength, the trust and loyalty of its people, might also be its greatest vulnerability. The middle years of the siege, from the 4th to the 7th, develop their own particular character. Both sides have settled into a rhythm that feels almost sustainable. Casualties in battles are often light, since neither side wants to risk devastating losses, in what has become a war of endurance rather than decisive action. Young men grow to maturity knowing no life except this strange balance of conflict and routine. Troy's walls prove their worth year after year. Built of stones so perfectly fitted that not even a knife blade can slip between them, reinforced by generations of careful maintenance, they turn aside every Greek assault. Siege engines brought from Greece, catapults and battering rams, mobile towers and undermining tunnels, all fail against the ancient fortifications. But walls, no matter how strong, cannot protect against everything. The real battle of the siege is fought not with bronze and iron, but with time and supplies, morale and determination. Which side can endure longer? Which people can maintain their purpose through years of hardship and uncertainty? By the 8th year, signs of strain appear on both sides. Some Greek cities begin to question the wisdom of keeping so many ships and men committed to a single campaign. Messages arrive urging Agamemnon to consider negotiated settlement, or to focus Greek military efforts on other, more achievable goals. Younger warriors who join the expedition seeking glory and quick victory begin to mutter about the futility of besieging a city that refuses to fall. Within Troy, different pressures build. The city's wealth, accumulated over centuries of successful trade, gradually depletes as the siege cuts off normal sources of income while military expenses mount steadily. Food shortages become more frequent, especially during winters when supply ships cannot navigate safely. Families grow tired of the constant vigilance required for siege life, of never knowing when the next attack might come. Yet both sides persist, held together by investments too large to abandon, and by leaders who understand that the first to give up will lose everything. The siege becomes a test of civilizations, as much as armies, Greek determination and organization against Trojan loyalty and endurance, with the gods themselves watching to see which virtues prove stronger. The 9th year brings changes that subtle but significant. Hector, now a veteran of countless battles, begins to show signs of the long strain. His hair, still thick and dark, now holds threads of silver at the temples. Lines around his eyes speak of too many nights spent planning defences and too many days spent fighting for his city's survival. Yet his commitment never wavers, his presence on the walls still a source of strength for Troy's defenders. As the 10th year begins, everyone senses that the siege cannot continue much longer in its current form. Both sides have reached the limits of what patient endurance can accomplish. Something must change, some new strategy, some decisive action, some intervention by gods or fate that will finally tip the balance and end this long stalemate. The wooden horse, when it appears, represents the culmination of 10 years of careful observation and planning. It's not just a trick, but the product of a decade spent learning Troy's strengths and weaknesses, understanding how its people think and what they value most. In a strange way, the horse is also a tribute to Troy's virtue. It works precisely because the Trojans are generous and trusting, because they choose to see gifts rather than threats. And so the endless siege approaches its end, not with the thunder of armies clashing or the roar of walls falling, but with a quiet wooden offering standing alone on an empty plain. After 10 years of waiting and war, the conclusion will come not through strength, but through the very qualities that made Troy worth fighting for in the first place. What does it mean when a city's greatest virtues become the instruments of its destruction? As the 10th year of the siege draws toward its climax, with the wooden horse standing silent on the plain before Troy's gates, the gods themselves gather to witness the conclusion of a conflict that has held their attention for a decade. But the divine involvement in Troy's fate runs deeper than mere observation. It reaches back to the very causes of the war and forward to consequences that will echo through generations. You find yourself in a place between earth and sky, in the ethereal realm where gods debate mortal fates with the same passion that humans argue over market prices or marriage arrangements. The great hall where they meet seems built of crystallized light and solidified music, its walls shifting between transparency and opacity as divine attention moves from speaker to speaker. Zeus sits at the centre of the gathering, his presence both magnificent and terrible. As king of the gods, he bears responsibility for maintaining cosmic balance, for ensuring that divine power serves justice rather than mere favoritism. But even Zeus has preferences, sympathies that pull him toward one side or another in the human drama playing out below. The divine council is split, and their division reflects the complexity of Troy's situation. On one side stand the gods who support the Greeks, Hera still nursing her wounded pride from Paris's judgment that declared Aphrodite more beautiful, Athena, goddess of strategic warfare who appreciates Greek military organization, and Poseidon, lord of the seas who helped build Troy's walls, but now feels slighted by the city's insufficient gratitude. On the other side gather Troy's divine protectors, Apollo, god of prophecy and music who loves the city's devotion to arts and learning, Aphrodite, goddess of love who started this whole conflict by promising Helen to Paris, and Artemis, who admires the fierce loyalty of Troy's people to their families and traditions. But divine politics are never simple, and each god's motivations combine personal preference with larger cosmic principles. Hera supports the Greeks not just from spite, but because she believes Troy has become too proud, too removed from the humble piety that gods prefer in their worshippers. Athena sees in Greek victory a triumph of disciplined intelligence over mere wealth and comfort. Apollo defends Troy partly from affection, but also from concern about what Greek victory might mean for the balance between civilization and barbarism. He has watched the siege drag on for 10 years, and seen how prolonged warfare coarsens even the most noble hearts. A Greek victory achieved through deception rather than honest combat troubles him deeply. As the gods debate, their conversation reveals layers of meaning in human events that mortals cannot perceive. What seems like a simple conflict over a stolen wife actually represents a cosmic struggle between different visions of how civilization should develop, how power should be balanced, how the relationship between mortals and immortals should evolve. Aphrodite speaks first, her voice carrying the warm authority of someone who understands love in all its forms, not just romantic passion, but the deep affection that binds families, communities, and peoples to their homeland. Troy fights for love, she argues. Paris loves Helen, and she loves him in return. The city loves its prince enough to endure 10 years of siege, rather than surrender him to his enemies. How can we punish such devotion? Hera responds with the cool logic of someone who has observed human behaviour for millennia. Love without wisdom is mere indulgence, she counters. Paris took another man's wife, violating the sacred bonds of hospitality and marriage. Troy's people may love their prince, but they love him more than they love justice. Such love becomes selfishness, and selfishness destroys the very communities it claims to protect. The debate grows more complex as other gods contribute their perspectives. Poseidon reminds the council that he helped build Troy's walls, making them strong enough to resist any earthly attack. But he also points out that walls built by divine power create obligations. Troy owes its security to the gods and should therefore show appropriate humility and gratitude. I have watched the city grow wealthy and confident behind the walls I helped create, Poseidon says, his voice carrying the deep rumble of ocean waves. But wealth without wisdom leads to arrogance, and arrogance among mortals threatens the proper order between earth and heaven. Apollo, beautiful and terrible in his golden radiance, speaks for Troy with passionate eloquence. The city honours us properly, he insists. Their temples burn with constant offerings. Their poets sing of divine glory. Their people live with reverence for powers greater than themselves. Would you destroy the most pious city in the world because of one prince's choice in love? But Athena, goddess of strategic thinking, sees deeper patterns in the conflict. This war isn't really about Paris and Helen anymore, she observes. It has become a test of different ways of living, different approaches to power and prosperity. Troy represents the old way. cities that grow rich through trade, that rely on walls and wealth for security. The Greeks represent something newer, peoples who achieve their goals through organisation, adaptation, and strategic thinking. The divine debate reveals something troubling about the nature of cosmic justice. The gods are not impartial judges weighing evidence and rendering fair verdicts. They are beings with preferences, prejudices, and personal investments in human affairs. Their idea of justice includes considerations that mortals might find incomprehensible or unfair. Zeus listens to all arguments before speaking, his words carrying the weight of ultimate authority. The fate of Troy touches upon larger questions than one city's survival, he acknowledges. The balance between east and west, between land power and sea power, between tradition and innovation. All these cosmic forces find expression in this single conflict. He pauses, and in that pause, you sense the terrible burden of making decisions that will affect millions of lives, not just in the present, but for generations to come. Troy must fall, Zeus declares finally, not because its people lack virtue, but because the world is changing, and Troy represents a way of life that can no longer sustain itself. The future belongs to peoples who can adapt, who can organise themselves for challenges they cannot yet imagine. The Divine Council accepts Zeus's judgment, but not without reservations. Apollo secures permission to protect certain individuals, to ensure that some Trojans escape the city's destruction to carry their culture and knowledge to new lands. Aphrodite wins assurance that the love between Paris and Helen, whatever its consequences, will be remembered as genuine rather than mere infatuation. But the most significant divine intervention comes from an unexpected source. Athena, having argued for Troy's destruction, now concerns herself with how that destruction occurs. She wants Greek victory to demonstrate strategic intelligence rather than mere brutality, to show that civilization can triumph through cleverness rather than savage force. It is Athena who inspires Odysseus with the idea of the wooden horse, who guides his hands as he sketches the first designs, who ensures that Greek craftsmen have the skill needed to build something beautiful enough to seem like a genuine religious offering. The horse becomes not just a military stratagem, but a divine test. Will Troy's people choose wisely when faced with an ambiguous gift? As the gods complete their preparations for Troy's final night, their actions reveal the complex relationship between divine will and human choice. The gods have decided Troy's ultimate fate, but they leave room for individual decisions, for personal acts of courage or cowardice, wisdom or folly. Some Trojans will die in the coming chaos, but others will escape to build new cities, carry on traditions, plant seeds of Trojan culture in foreign soil. The divine perspective also reveals something troubling about the nature of historical change. Great civilizations do not usually fall because they are evil or worthless, but because they cannot adapt quickly enough to new circumstances. Troy's destruction represents not moral judgment, but cosmic evolution, the painful process by which the world moves from one era to another. Cassandra's gift of prophecy, cursed though it is, represents divine mercy as much as divine cruelty. Apollo gives her the ability to see what's coming, not to torment her, but to offer Troy one last chance to avoid its fate through wisdom, rather than endure it through destruction. The fact that no one believes her warnings reflects human nature more than divine malice. As the divine council disperses, each, God preparing to play their role in Troy's final hours, you sense the tragedy inherent in cosmic justice. The gods are not cruel, but they serve purposes larger than individual happiness, or even individual civilizations. They must sometimes destroy what they love in order to preserve the larger patterns that give meaning to existence itself. Watching from their ethereal realm, the gods see Troy not just as a city, but as a symbol, a test case for how power and prosperity should be balanced with wisdom and adaptability. The wooden horse becomes their instrument of instruction, a lesson about the dangers of trusting appearances, about the need for constant vigilance even in moments of apparent triumph. But perhaps the deepest divine lesson embedded in Troy's story concerns the relationship between love and wisdom. The city falls because its people love too much and think too little. They love Paris enough to risk everything for his happiness, love their traditions enough to ignore signs of necessary change, love their own strength enough to trust in gifts from enemies. Yet the gods do not condemn this love, even as they orchestrate its consequences. Love remains divine even when it leads to disaster, and the courage born of love creates beauty that outlasts the cities where it first flourished. Troy will fall, but the memory of Trojan love, for family, for city, for the values that make life meaningful, will survive in stories that teach future generations about both the power and the peril of caring deeply about anything in this uncertain world. As dawn approaches, and the wooden horse stands ready for its final journey into Troy, the gods take their positions to witness the culmination of their long involvement in human affairs. They have chosen sides, but they have also ensured that both victory and defeat will carry meaning, that destruction and survival will both serve the larger purposes of cosmic growth and change. How do mortals live with dignity when even the gods cannot offer simple answers about right and wrong? The wooden horse stands in Troy's central square now, magnificent and ominous in the flickering light of celebration torches. The city has accepted Athena's gift with ceremonies of gratitude and relief, never imagining that they have invited their own destruction past the walls that protected them for 10 long years. As midnight approaches, Troy settles into what will be its last peaceful sleep. You find yourself moving through the quiet streets like a ghost, observing the final hours of a civilization that has no idea it is living through its own ending. In houses throughout the city, families gather for evening meals that taste sweeter because the war is finally over. Children play games in moonlit courtyards, their laughter echoing off stone walls that have sheltered countless generations. Old people sit in doorways, talking quietly about the peace they never expected to live long enough to see. The royal palace glows with warm light as King Priam hosts a feast for Troy's nobles and military leaders. Wine flows freely. Good wine that has been saved for special occasions, brought up from deep cellars where it has waited through years of siege and hardship. The conversations are joyful but tired, the happiness of people who have endured great trials and finally see light at their end. Hector sits at his father's right hand, still wearing his bronze armour, though he has loosened the straps for comfort. Even in celebration, Troy's greatest warrior remains alert, his eyes occasionally moving toward windows and doorways with the automatic vigilance of someone who has spent 10 years expecting attack. But tonight, for the first time in a decade, that vigilance seems unnecessary. Cassandra is notably absent from the feast. She remains in Apollo's temple, kneeling before the altar where oil lamps cast dancing shadows on marble walls. Her prayers tonight are different from her usual desperate warnings. Tonight she prays for the strength to witness what she cannot prevent, to bear testimony to Troy's final hours, to remember accurately so that someday someone might learn from her city's fate. As the celebration winds down and Troy's people drift towards sleep, the wooden horse maintains its silent vigil in the square. Citizens walking past pause to admire its craftsmanship, to run their hands over wood polished smooth as silk, to marvel at painted details that make it seem almost alive in the shifting torchlight. Children dare each other to touch its painted eyes, then run away giggling when courage fails them. But inside the horse's hollow belly, 30 Greek warriors wait in cramped darkness, their bronze armour wrapped in cloth to prevent any telltale sound. Odysseus leads them, his clever mind focused now not on strategy, but on the simple discipline of remaining perfectly still. These men have volunteered for a mission that requires them to trust completely in their leader's plan, to control their breathing and heartbeat, while surrounded by enemies who could discover them at any moment. The waiting is perhaps the hardest part. Pressed together in the horse's belly, the Greeks can hear Troy's celebration through the wooden walls. Voices raised in song, footsteps of dancing, the clink of cups being raised in toasts to peace and victory. They hear children playing near the horse, parents calling them home, guards making their regular rounds with comfortable, unhurried pace. Midnight passes, then the deep hours after midnight, when even the most dedicated revellers seek their beds. Troy settles into sleep with the profound relaxation of a city that believes its troubles are over. Guards remain at their posts on the walls, but their attention turns outward toward the empty plain where Greek campfires once burned, not inward toward the square where danger now waits in wooden concealment. When Odysseus finally signals for the horse to open, the night is so quiet that the soft scrape of hidden panels seems unnaturally loud. One by one, the Greek warriors emerge, lowering themselves on ropes to the stone pavement, with movements made clumsy by long hours of confinement. They stretch cramped muscles, adjust armour that has shifted during the wait, check weapons with hands that tremble slightly from nervous tension. The first part of their mission requires moving through Troy's streets to reach the main gates, overpowering guards and opening the way for the Greek army that waits on nearby ships. But as they begin to move, something unexpected happens. The city's beauty, visible now in moonlight and shadow, affects even these hardened warriors who have come to destroy it. Troy at night is magnificent. Moonlight turns white limestone walls into silver, makes garden pools mirror the stars, transforms ordinary buildings into something that seems carved from dreams. The Greeks, who have spent 10 years outside these walls imagining the city as a fortress to be conquered, suddenly see it as a place where people live, love, work, and sleep. Not so different from their own distant homes. But war has its own momentum, and men who have committed themselves to violence cannot easily turn back from their purpose. The Greeks reach the gates and overwhelm the sleepy guards with quick efficiency, the result of 10 years spent planning for exactly this moment. Signal fires blaze from the walls, calling the hidden fleet back from Tenedos with news that Troy lies open to conquest. The fires wake the city gradually, like a pebble thrown into still water, creating ever-widening circles of alarm. First the guards sound horns, trying to rally defenders to repel what they assume is another Greek raid. Then people emerge from houses to see what the commotion means, rubbing sleep from their eyes, calling questions to neighbours who know no more than they do. Understanding comes slowly, in terrible pieces. Greek soldiers are inside the city, not just raiding parties that can be driven off, but organised forces moving with clear purpose towards strategic targets. The wooden horse stands empty now in the square, its panels hanging open like a mouth that has disgorged secrets. The war that seemed over has suddenly resumed, but with Troy's greatest advantage, its walls, rendered useless. Hector emerges from the palace already armed, calling for his captains to organise defence even as he tries to understand how enemies could appear inside Troy's impregnable fortifications. His training takes over, years of military experience providing automatic responses even when the situation defies everything he thought he knew about warfare. But the defence of Troy faces impossible odds. The city's soldiers are scattered throughout the settlement, many of them sleeping off the evening celebration. Their weapons and armour are stored rather than ready for immediate use. Worst of all, they must fight in streets and squares they know intimately as places of peace, trying to turn familiar, comfortable spaces into battlegrounds. The Greeks, meanwhile, fight with the desperate efficiency of men who know they have one chance to succeed. If Troy's defenders organise effective resistance, if help arrives from neighbouring cities, if the surprise attack fails to achieve quick, decisive results, they will be trapped inside enemy walls with no hope of escape. Everything depends on speed, on breaking Trojan resistance before it can properly form. Individual moments of heroism and tragedy flicker through the night like flames in a windstorm. A baker named Polyxo, whom we met before making celebration bread, dies defending her ovens from soldiers who want to prevent anyone from signalling for help with smoke. An old weaver throws herself between Greek spears and her granddaughter, buying time for the child to escape through a window. Hector fights magnificently, as he has for 10 years, his bronze spear cutting down enemies who thought victory was already secured. For a brief time, his presence rallies Troy's defenders, creates a core of resistance that might have driven the invaders back. But then Achilles appears, drawn by the sounds of battle with his famous armour gleaming in the firelight. The duel between Hector and Achilles happens not in the broad daylight of formal combat, but in the chaotic darkness of a city under attack, with buildings burning around them and civilians fleeing through smoke-filled streets. Their fight is desperate rather than glorious. Two exhausted warriors who have spent a decade trying to kill each other finally meeting when Troy's survival hangs in the balance. When Hector falls, struck down by Achilles' spear as flames begin to consume the palace where he was born, something breaks in Troy's spirit that cannot be repaired by courage or loyalty alone. The city's greatest defender is dead, its strongest walls have been bypassed, its people are scattered and confused in the darkness. Resistance continues in scattered pockets, but organised defence becomes impossible. Cassandra emerges from Apollo's temple as the fires spread, no longer the unbelieved prophet, but simply a woman watching her world end exactly as she knew it would. She moves through the burning streets like someone walking through a remembered nightmare, checking on people she's known all her life, offering what comfort she can to those beyond saving. In the chaos of Troy's final hours, individual stories of loss and survival play out against the larger tragedy. King Priam dies defending his palace, struck down by Greek soldiers who show no respect for his age or royal dignity. Queen Hecuba survives but watches her city burn, her children die, her life's work reduced to ash and rubble in a single night. Some Trojans escape the destruction, slipping away through gates the Greeks have not yet secured, following secret paths known only to locals, trusting in darkness and confusion to hide their flight. These survivors carry with them not just their lives but Troy's culture, its traditions, its accumulated wisdom about how to build cities and live in peace. The fires burn until dawn, consuming not just buildings but the accumulated work of generations. Libraries full of scrolls, workshops full of tools and half-finished projects, temples where prayers have been offered for centuries, all of it feeding flames that turn Troy's golden limestone walls black with smoke. As sunrise reveals the full extent of the destruction, even the Greek victors seem stunned by what they have accomplished. Troy's fall represents military success beyond their most optimistic hopes, but it also means the end of something beautiful and irreplaceable. The city that has dominated their thoughts for 10 years no longer exists except as smoking ruins and scattered memories. The wooden horse still stands in the square, now surrounded by debris and ash instead of celebration garlands. Its painted eyes stare out over destruction, its presence made possible, a monument to the power of human cleverness and the vulnerability of human trust. Children who dared each other to touch it yesterday are dead or fled, their laughter replaced by the crackle of cooling embers. Cassandra, found among the temple ruins by Greek soldiers who recognize her value as a prize of war, speaks one final prophecy as she's led away to slavery. "You have won," she tells her captors, "but victory will bring you no joy. The city you destroyed was the last place on earth where gods and mortals lived together in harmony. Now that it is gone, both gods and men will wander homeless, searching for something they will never find again." The fall of Troy ends not with triumph, but with a strange, hollow silence that settles over the ruins like dust. The Greeks have achieved their goal, but the achievement tastes of ash. They have proven that no walls are impregnable, that no city is too strong to fall, but in doing so they have also proven that human beings are capable of destroying the most beautiful things they create. As the last fires die down and the survivors begin the long work of counting losses and planning futures, Troy's story transforms from history into legend, from military campaign into something larger, a reminder that all civilizations are fragile, that trust can be betrayed, that the things we love most deeply are often the things most easily lost. What dreams survive when the cities that birthed them lie in ruins?